Welcome, folks, to episode 194 of The Morgue, the official CorpseFeed podcast. And I am Arturo, Padilla, the guy behind the face. And with me always is Mr. Nick Valdez. Tex, how are you, man? How's it going today?
Oh man, howdy, Arturo. Howdy, everybody. Howdy, Arturo. Yeah, so we have a lot to jump into, mostly from Netflix, which is like, it's funny, right? So, we'll talk about a Netflix movie and then we'll never see it, or like we'll be like, it'll come out and Netflix will be like, oh yeah, like Atlas, right? So just before we even jump into it, it's funny that Atlas was like the number one, like Netflix is like, oh, it's our number one movie around the world. And it's like, yeah, but I don't think I've seen anyone see it or like talk about seeing it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's so funny because it's like, where's this coming from? And so I say all this to bring up Trigger Warning, which is a terrible title. This is one of those like, oh no, but it's a Jessica Alba action movie. And so that's why I'm like, Arturo, we got to talk about this one, because Jessica Alba in an action thing, I think the last time, like, yeah, she's been in like Fantastic Four and stuff, but the last time she was in like a dope action thing was that James Cameron TV show, Dark
Angel.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, remember, she was in, wasn't she in Planet Terror or one of the Grindhouses, right? Like she did something there, or Machete or something, right?
Yeah, she was in one of the Rodriguez things.
I think she did. Yeah, I think she did Machete.
Yeah, I think it was Machete, because Planet Terror was what's her name from Jawbreaker?
It was Rose McGowan.
Charmed. Yes.
Yeah, it was Rose McGowan in Planet Terror. But listen, okay, so trigger warning, right? First of all, terrible name. But
terrible
aside,
yes.
Terrible, terrible title for a movie. But all that aside, I'm happy for her that she has this outlet of Netflix. I know she has been doing a Spectrum TV show with Gabrielle Union on Spectrum TV.
That's the thing. That was
LAPD
like
thing or whatever years ago, right?
Yeah, that was like pre-COVID too. So it was like definitely like, this was pre-2020. So it was legit years.
Yeah. So
that was like a Bad Boy spinoff too, like on top of that. Yeah.
Was it really?
Like, yeah, it was.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll probably talk more about that next week, but because I'm interested in that. I had no clue that was a spinoff of Bad Boys.
Yeah.
But anyways, but I'm glad that she is doing something, but we do have this, big black cloud over Netflix action movies recently, right?
Right.
With Cloud Atlas bombing pretty much critically. So I'm glad we don't have to watch that. And then we witnessed Rebel Moon 1 and 2, right?
Yeah.
So
yes.
So the track record for Netflix action movies isn't really there. I think the last really good one they had, what was it? Extraction, maybe, right?
Right.
But the Ryan Gosling one was good too, right? The Hitman one was pretty decent. But again, I'm a little worried because it is Netflix. It is there for us to enjoy if we so choose to. So I'm glad the content is there for us, selfishly speaking, right? I'm glad the content is there. It is in like she's ex special forces or some kind of
some
army
kind
unit
of like
or something.
Yeah, some kind of government operative ex CIA type deal where now she's got it's definitely like generic Sunday afternoon laundry kind of movie, but the reason I bring it up here is because it's Jessica Alba, and it's just one of those things where she's got that place in my heart of like, this is early icon of a certain era, and it's like, I want to see her succeed.
Listen, she looks great. She always does. I hope this movie's good story-wise. I hope it's like watchable, right? Like I hope it's like, hey, give me a 6,
right?
No, just give me a 6. Give me a solid. Wait for it. Like why is this on Netflix? Why?
Like
why do we choose to watch you here?
Yeah, like Netflix, at worst gives us really bad stuff, but at best we can get like a 7 or 8, and
Yeah.
if we're lucky, we'll get like a super good movie that we'll be like, yo, can't wait we'll have to, it'll be one of those, like we'll watch it and be like, all right, we got to talk about this on the Morgue, so we'll see how that works out. It's the same for the next one we're talking about, Under Paris, which is like a French shark movie. See, okay, I don't know about these effects in this, but
Listen, we saw the Meg 2 last year, right? So I'll take it, especially because it is horror on Netflix. Their horror is very lacking these days. And I am happy that we got a summer shark movie. I think shark movies should be released once a year. Someone should be, like that should be like a creative thing for someone, like a test. It's like,
You're
yo,
right. Yeah.
make me a shark movie. Like I don't care what kind of shark it is, how deadly it is, how you got it to make it a killer shark. Just make me a shark movie. We'll release it on Netflix. I mean, like that kind of premise is really cool, and it's always led to interesting things, right? So
Right.
I am a fan of shark movies, and I like French horror. So put them together. I'm crossing my fingers. I am hoping it is a watchable movie. The premise is a little wonky, so
It is, but
yeah,
that's also part of being a shark movie.
It's also
though,
a
right?
shark movie thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it has to be a ridiculous thing where there's just loads of people together for some reason in the water, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't make it somebody just vacationing. It's like, hey, let's make this cool race, in this French channel, and then let this shark loose.
Yeah, because it's funny that you bring up the Meg, right? Where like the way it brought in everybody, it was just like, oh yeah, the Meg's just gonna pop up on like a shore in like China somewhere where like people are like vacationing and stuff, and that's how you get the people into the movie, right? Like
That's
the victims.
it. It's a shark movie. Like
That's there's ridiculousness in the premise, right? There's always that kind of thing. Like you get some movies like Sharknado where they kind of steer completely into it and go viral because of that. But then you also get movies that are like that take it seriously, but also still kind of play off as goofy, like Deep Blue Sea, where like Deep Blue Sea, it takes it seriously, but it still comes off as goofy in the end, right?
Because technically the shark becomes a monster, right?
Yeah,
so it has that monster movie aspect to it. But like there are movies that take it full seriously, like In the Shallows with
The Shallows with
that was good.
That's a good one. Yes.
And Open Water as well, where they where they're like on this boat and they capsize. Like that's like scary real life stuff where you're like, oh my god, that's kind of creepy and scary, and that can happen. So there are a vast array of ridiculousness in shark movies, right? So this one bodes to be in that kind of not Sharknado, but you're leaning towards that kind of ridiculous angle, and I'm here for it because screw it. It's summer shark movies. We're here for it.
I assume stay tuned for Scary World. I'm sure you'll have
1,000%. I smell my own Shark Week incoming for that movie.
You smell that. See, you smell the blood in the water.
I smell the chum in the water. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I can't wait for that. That should be fun. And speaking of, I can't wait for Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. Believe it or not, Tex, I am kind of rather a little excited about this movie. This, believe it or not, is the first full horror genre movie that my daughter saw, like when she was like a little baby. Just like, one day she was just watching it and she didn't even pass out throughout the entire thing. It was wild. And I am excited for this because I really dig the way Michael Keaton looks aged. I think the Beetlejuice aged look kind of really works for his character. It looks a little bit more grimy, more sleazy. In terms of what else is going on in the story, I have no idea what's gonna happen, but I do like what is going on with Beetlejuice. That's why I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I dig it.
I am in the same boat because it's sort of like what even is a Beetlejuice sequel? I think that is the question that we're still asking,
Yeah.
because the first one, the story's not really like a grand story, right? It's just like, a family moves into a house and they start getting bothered by, as Lydia Dietz puts it in the trailer, like a prankster demon that he just
Yeah.
kind of starts messing with their lives. And when you think about it in that scope, it's like, yeah, it really is a very small, intimate movie, like a story. Yeah, like Beetlejuice is wacky and out of this world, and there's the land of the dead and stuff, but it's really just like this core family, right? And so, you don't really think of that on the scale of like, oh, is there a lore to Beetlejuice, or is there like a what stories could you tell with Beetlejuice? Like they tried to do that with like the animated show and stuff, but
Yeah.
it I'm in the same boat, Arturo, where I'm like, hey, I'm down if Michael Keaton's down and he's clearly, feeling it. He's clearly like
Yeah.
the older look. I know we talked about it during
Yeah.
the trailer, the teaser, where we were like, oh, well, does the older look work for him? And yeah, it does. Now that we see more of it, right? Like
Yeah,
it
like I
clearly
really
works.
think it does. I'm really curious about Monica Bellucci's role in it, and as well as Willem Dafoe's role in it,
Right.
because like their characters look very,
They look very
very
modern, right?
wonky as well. Yeah, and
They look modern compared to like the older Beetlejuice designs,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I'm just curious about that. There was a little Easter egg. Supposedly, Monica Bellucci's finger's missing, and that's where he gets the ring to try and marry Winona Ryder in part one.
See,
Uh,
okay, so
yeah.
that's funky because in the first one, it's just kind of like a throwaway joke, right? Like
Yes,
he's
exactly.
kind of like, oh, she didn't mean anything to me. Like it's
Yeah,
just like
exactly. It's
a
a finger
funny
he gets
like,
out of the pocket. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a funny but now they're making it like a lore thing, and it's like, oh, is she coming back for like, is she the wife he was gonna marry or something? Like,
Yeah,
and
I'm totally down for that. That looks fun. Like that aspect of the movie looks
right.
fun. I think that's probably the B story, right? I'm not sure that's going to be the A story. I think the one with Jenna Ortega and what she's doing and her encounter with Beetlejuice, and she like incidentally or actually accidentally conjures him, right? Because the mother doesn't like you see that that's one thing. Like you should explain these things to kids sometimes, especially as they get older and get curious. Like, especially so they don't say the freaking name 3 times the way she does in the trailer. Whether it goes down like that in the movie, who knows? But uh, it shows that she's the one responsible for Beetlejuice showing up and doing whatever he does in this one. So
Yeah, it
I am curious about that kind of side as well.
yeah, we'll see how that turns out, because like I'm curious about like the Tim Burton of it all, because
Mhm.
he it's not really like he's on the top of his game anymore. He has turned in some like wacky stuff, and like looking at the effects in this movie, there's a lot more CG than you would kind of hope for like in a Beetlejuice movie,
Yeah.
so it's like, I don't know. I don't know what to think of that. I honestly don't know. Like this is I don't know if I want another trailer either. I think this is kind of like enough to
Oh, we're
me.
gonna
So
get I mean, it's
we're
not even the summer season fully yet, so we're
yeah,
definitely gonna get another one probably by maybe with Deadpool.
we're probably gonna get tons of trailers and clips. Like this is one of those, right? Where we're gonna see it throughout the year. We're gonna get
Yeah.
little Michael Keaton little clips on like Instagram and stuff like that. So I don't I don't know. I'm in. As right now, I am into it. We'll just have to see, I guess, right? Like this is all,
Yeah, it comes out in September. Hopefully, it doesn't get pushed back, right? Because
Yeah,
things tend to get pushed back all of a sudden these days, so who knows?
yeah.
And it's weird because September is kind of dump month of Jace, right? So
It
it is.
is. Yeah.
I am curious that they are putting it there, maybe to take advantage of the slow month. Because
Yeah,
in terms of
it's not even like late September either,
yeah,
right?
it's
Like
early
it's not even
September.
like, yeah.
It's right at the beginning of football season, folks, on September 6th, a day after week one starts, right? It drops. So I am curious about that. Because the release schedule is a little bit slow. There are a lot of gaps in terms of good theatrical releases coming up past the immediate summertime. Like past June and July, it's kind of slow. So maybe they put it there for a reason, but it is curious. They put it in September and not really October. Maybe it's some anniversary thing or other. That's what they do sometimes. But I would have honestly put it right in the beginning of spooky season or right at the end of September, at least to kick off spooky season. That'd be perfect. It's a perfect gimmick. You can run crazy, easy marketing for that stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I don't get paid for that stuff. That's way above our pay grade. We don't even get paid for that stuff. So it just boggles the mind sometimes. It's like, hey, it just kind of makes sense for you to start spooky season with Beetlejuice too. Whatever. It just kind of writes itself. But anyways, folks, next up, our feature presentation. Welcome back, and we are ready to talk about our feature presentation today, the one, the only Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Tex, what say you? Do we say stay away from it, wait for it, or pay for it?
Once again, buddies, pay for it means go out to the theater immediately and go see it, or pay for it or rent it as soon as you can pay for it. Wait for it is, wait for it to hit streaming. You don't really need to see it in theaters, not really rushing to it. And then stay away from it, self-explanatory. I would say pay for it. Like it's a big, it's a big movie. Big in many ways, which we'll get into, right? Like in all definitions of the word, it's big.
Yep.
And so but it's also a movie. Like it's like you see it in theaters and you kind of want to see some of those things on the big screen playing out on as big of a thing as possible. Like it, it's not like Fury Road. We'll get into that too, right? But it's sort of like that, where like Fury Road gave us that like pure adrenaline fueled like 2 hours, and like that was like that's one of my favorite like theater experiences in terms of just like watching movies, right? But with this one, it's good. Go see it in the theater. I think I'll wrap my end of that before we get into it. What did you think, Arturo? How you feeling?
I also think it is a pay for it for the things you did mention. I do have issues with this, and we're gonna get into that later.
Yes.
If you guys caught the Scary World about it, about this movie, I gave it an 8 out of 10. It does do a lot of good things, but there are also some things that unfortunately and surprisingly it does not too great. But I do think it's a pay for it. It does look really good on screen. I didn't have a chance to watch it in IMAX, but I was like, I have a big enough screen in this theater to satisfy me. And it looked really good. Action wise, look wise, visuals and stuff, it looks good. So for me, it is a pay for it. But let's get into it, because the only way to really talk about it is to start breaking it down and spoiling the hell out of this thing for you guys. So let's talk about the really good stuff, because obviously it is the action, right? That we get in this movie. So that looks really good. Like he does his thing like he did in Fury Road. And we get a lot of awesome, Fury, like legit Fury Road action, which is the road to Gastown and to the Bullet Farm. And we get like there's this one sequence, which I think it's at least, a good 15-minute sequence. I read.
It feels like a good chunk of the movie, right? And
dude, it took him about a week to film that whole sequence, man.
Yeah, I think it definitely plays out like that in the movie, and I think that's also one of my
one of the good things, right? And the bad things there, right?
Yeah, like it's one of the things where it's like it's good because it's a really good action sequence, right? And of course, like when you're watching it, you're like, man, this is dope. But then when you get out of the movie and you think about what you saw throughout the entire thing, it's like, well, did we really need to spend so much time on like that stuff, right? Yeah,
it's like I think you feel kind of gypped, but they trick you.
Yeah,
they candy code it, right? They're like, yo, listen, like our story about Furiosa isn't that deep, but we got this really awesome War Rig stuff going on. We're gonna throw that in your face every time you want more Furiosa, just so you can forget about it, and we'll throw her in there too. But I definitely think there is a missed opportunity with that story and that character, because the time she is on screen, which honestly, it doesn't feel like she's on screen that much.
Yes.
Right.
Like, I guess the best way to lay it out is to like frame it, right? Because it's like it's called Furiosa, right? But she kind of feels like second fiddle to like some of the other characters,
to
right?
Dementis specifically. Like Dementis feels like he's the A story here, because honestly, like they wrote it like that. Like
it feels that way.
It feels like you're watching two different movies, right? Like there's the Furiosa saga, which is super interesting, and I want to see more of it because that's what you told me, to come to the theater for, and her story is definitely super interesting, but there's a lot of gaps in her timeline, and it's unfortunate because we don't get her quote unquote training montage. We don't get her coming of age story, as I said on Scary World, right? Like we need that. We need her growing up to be the Furiosa we get in Fury Road, right? Like honestly, like I thought Fury Road was named after Furiosa because she was so badass, and I'm like, this name is too cool, and it's such coincidence. But yeah, I felt kind of gypped, but then like it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, we didn't get enough Furiosa, but Dementis was so good that I could have used a lot more of that too.
And see that this is one of those movies that like, it's like 2.5 hours, something like that. But like honestly, if you would like if it were sold like Avatar, like Zack Snyder's Justice League or something like that, where straight up you told me this whole time that hey, this, or like Oppenheimer, right? If they straight up, if Mad Max was straight up like, yo, Furiosa is 3 hours, and if I knew it was 3 hours going in, I'd be willing to go through those 3 hours.
Bet, let's get extra popcorn, please.
Because watching this movie, it feels long, and it does have moments where it feels overly long, but it also doesn't feel like it has enough of that good stuff that you're talking about, right? So
you know what? Like you're absolutely right. If they gave us that extra extra 40 minutes, right? Because it's 2 hours and 25 minutes. If you gave us that full 3 hours, you could have injected a lot more Furiosa story in there and kept the Dementis stuff there, because that worked. That was really good. I like that stuff. But
because the Furiosa stuff's super interesting, right? Because it's like this movie is set up like to be completely different Fury Road. Because Fury Road, when you look at it in a vacuum, it's legit super simple, right? It's just like it's just a car chase, right?
It's a chase movie. It's a freaking elite level, stylized chase, pretty much. That's it.
And and it's no story. So it's like all the story from that is like in this one, right? And you're setting up Furiosa, and it's like this revenge tale, and you're like, oh man, like, and it starts from when she's like a very little kid, and like it follows her through the thing. But that's the thing, right? It's like we don't get enough of those in betweens, right? We don't get enough of that life growing up as a kid trying to hide herself among like all the war boys.
Dude, yes, like yes, thank you, because I was gonna go back to, we don't even get enough of her growing up in the Green Place, right? We don't get acquainted with the Green Place to even be like, oh, what is it that you want to go back to?
Right?
Because when we first meet her, she's out in the forest before her town and her village or whatever, and we don't even see like her completely as a youth or anything like that. We get robbed of a lot of time with her on screen. I don't know why that is. I want to think they have that time actually developed properly somewhere, right? But we don't get enough time there. And you're absolutely right. There is a huge segment there that she gets brought into Immortan's Joe Citadel, right? Gets dealt by Dementis to be one of his, little wives, right? that he puts in, in his vault, as we saw in Fury Road. So it touches on that thing, right? And then, there's this thing with with Rictus, which is the dude with the gas pack on his back, the big strong guy. He's a freaking weirdo, right? So there's that story there, but then like there's a lot missing there, because it's like, one, I would think Immortan Joe would be questioning where his newest prize wife is, first of all, because she was the youngest of his wives, right? So that's one thing that's never really explored, which I'm very upset about, because that's the whole point of Fury Road. Furiosa takes his wives and runs away, to the green place,
Right.
But in this one, we get that morsel of a story, which again, it's leading to more issues, because here George Miller just wants to add lore upon lore upon lore, like mad layers of this stuff, without properly kind of like fully fleshing it out. Like he just gives you a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there. And it's like, cool, thank you. But like, let's go back to the regular story,
Yeah, and it's so funny.
Point.
It's so funny too, because you watch the Mad Max movies, and if there's one thing George Miller doesn't care about, it's continuity. Because
they're all different.
Each one is so different from one another. There are, there are returning actors. Like, you got Mel Gibson in the original trilogy. He shows up in all of them, but like he's technically a different Max each time. Like, if you look at all of them, and then you have how little Miller cares about continuity, you have actors appearing in different characters, different roles. Like in the first one, the guy who played the toe cutter, or it's like toe carver or something like that. He's Immortan Joe.
Yeah, he's Immortan Joe. Yeah.
And so like, and now it's a new actor, but then like also in Furiosa, for example, there are actors playing like two different characters throughout this whole thing, and like three different characters. Like the guy who plays the Immortan Joe in this movie also plays like one of Dementis's like side goons with like the little feather thing on his hat. And it's stuff like that where it's like, that's how little he cares about continuity. So when he starts adding all this lore and all this stuff, it's like, well, you can't do one without the other, right? You can't keep world building and then all of a sudden not care about like the timeline is so, because that's how you get Beyond Thunderdome, where like a whole half of that movie is so boring, because it starts introducing kids and like their philosophy, and they're like, oh, we want to escape and like go, and that was like proto Green Place stuff, right? This is like prototype Green Place,
where they're exactly
like, and legends and stuff, and it turns into this whole thing, and it's like, no, stick with the stuff we care about.
Turns into freaking Fern Gully, the last rainforest. You know what I mean?
Yes, and this is what you're saying, Arturo, where it's like, you're going too big with this, when all we want is Furiosa. All we care about is Furiosa, right?
Yes.
And it's like,
Furiosa! You say it so many times in the trailer, and I'm like, yeah, it's Furiosa. I want so much more Furiosa.
Yeah, but when you watch the movie, it spends so much time like giving us these lore bombs, and like to borrow a phrase, like it's such a history man giving us word burgers about like the way the world works, right?
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And like, but at the same and this is one of those things where it's like, it's a criticism, but also at the same time, Miller has made such a weird world that's kind of like, okay, I get why you want to play around in it, right?
Yes.
It's like you get characters like Chris Hemsworth, right?
Yes. Yeah. You get the Dementis, and you get scenes like the the Warwick scene we just spoke about earlier. It's like a kid playing in a sandbox, like legit. He's playing out in the desert,
Yes.
He's like, oh my God, I got this big war rig, and we're going to just kind of cruise it. And then he has bikes cross, and then, oh my God. And then it has this spinning thing in the back with a freaking, the Bobby knocker. Yeah. It has the Bobby knocker in the back. It's like a kid. And I get it, because I want more of the war rig. Honestly, I could have just sat there watching the war rig get attacked for like 2 hours.
Because that's Fury Road. And that's the thing, right?
It's like, that's what brought me back, right? That's what brought me back here. And Furiosa brought me back. You were saying how Fury Road didn't really have a story. I kind of disagree. It has this really kind of undertone story of Furiosa, right? And of this
That's
place
true.
she goes
Yeah.
back to, like she is the anchor of that movie. Like it's funny how it's flipped here, where Furiosa is acting like the Mad Max kind of character, where she has barely any lines, right? And she's doing a bunch of action and a bunch of stuff to move the story forward, right? That you need a lot of catalyst stuff. And I thought that was really interesting, but it's like, dude, you have Anya Taylor-Joy here. Like, make her freaking talk. This
You know,
woman can like speak her ass off. Like, she can give you like bars upon bars of
yeah.
monologue. Like, make her speak, dude.
And that's the thing too. Like, that's what makes those moments hit even harder, because like it's one of those, like, it's, you know, because when she does speak, it, it's wild how close she got to Charlize Theron's performance too.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
that
like
voice was
watching
very
it.
close, man. I was
Yeah,
like, wow, that's
yeah.
crazy.
It is wild seeing it, right? You're like, man, like, you know, because they do, like, it made me for a second think, like, did they digitally alter her voice to like kind of match Charlize Theron's? Because like they do kind of like digitally alter the younger one's face, so they look more like Anya Taylor-Joy, so there's less of like a jump between actors. But like, I don't know, I think that's just Anya, that's just the power of her acting, right? Like
The
she's just
guy,
that good.
the guy who played Praetorian Jack, Tom Burke, which is like who? Honestly, I thought
Right.
they should have gotten a more prominent actor, but then you just mentioned how George Miller really doesn't care about the actors
I
behind there unless
see.
it's like the A star, you know?
Funny, yeah, funny enough, I didn't know, like, I didn't catch his name at first. I thought he was just Max. Like, I thought he was just like the Max.
He
And
had the shoulder thingy like Mad
yeah,
Max did, bro.
yeah.
Mad
So, and
trickery,
you know, and
man.
he's got the Mel Gibson hair, right? He's got the slick back hair. So I
He's
was
got
like,
the leather
oh
jacket, the slick back
yes,
hair, the little shoulder thing. Like you could have fooled me, man.
yeah. So I thought it was just Max. So I was just like, oh cool. So they ran into each other but just didn't remember, you know, all those years later, right?
Yeah.
And because it's Mad Max, I was like, oh, okay, who cares? Because, you know, George Miller doesn't care, but, you know, that's the whole thing. And Anya Taylor-Joy, when she does finally get to speak, and she does, like, this is also why you cast her too, because she's got those eyes, and it's like, you know,
Yeah, she's
there's
got
so
those
much
big eyes.
there's so much done with just like her eyes, and like the camera clearly loves her, right? But
Yeah.
then once again, I think this all goes back to what we were saying before. She kind of feels second fiddle in her own movie, because there's another performance just kind of like overpowering her and kind of stealing the show with Chris Hemsworth as Dementus.
Yeah.
Dementus, and then Dementus the Red, and then
Dr.
Dark
Dementus. Dr. Dementus. Show some respect, dude. Come
And
on.
well, was he Dr. Dementus?
Listen,
I didn't.
that's
Okay,
how
yeah.
IMDb puts it down, and that's how I
Okay,
roll.
awesome. Yeah.
So
So, and
Dr.
it's great
Dementis. Oh
that
yeah,
that
it's funny because like they go back. You see, like this is what's cool about the lore, right? So they go back to it where in Fury Road, one of the wives, right, was saying how they were rolling with Dr. D when the end all happened. And that's the Dr. D that they're
okay.
referring to. It's Dr. Dementis, which I thought I'm like, okay, cool.
You know,
I'm glad they are putting things together like that. I like that a lot. But again, as you were saying, Chris Hemsworth, man, in this movie, he is like scene stealing. He is taking up a lot of screen time. And you know what? It's all good because the screen time they give him is warranted, honestly. Like, it's like when he's on there, it's like, holy crap. Like, he knows how to play this kooky kind of warlord. I love the accent. I love the fake nose that they put on him. I thought that was a
dude,
really nice touch.
I love that he's a doctor, you know, and then you have to emphasize that he's a doctor, because he's also kind of stupid, right? Like they made sure to like this movie highlights how stupid of a leader he really is, right? And how bad it is, because he, like, first of all, he kind of like randomly gets into the Immortan Joe thing because he just randomly spots like a war boy signal, right? And they're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, let's just go check that out. And then he finds out about this whole citadel and all this stuff, and he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna try and conquer it all, right?
Yeah.
And then he conquers the place, and then it immediately goes south, which is hilarious, right? Like it
Yeah.
immediately starts to tank, and then he becomes so he becomes Dementus the Red with one of the coolest shots in this whole movie, where the blood bag pops and he's gets covered in that red mist, and he's he transforms.
Yeah, yeah. Was it a blood bag or was it one of their flares, right?
Oh yeah, it was the flare.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that they had no clue what the flare gun was, right?
yes,
And they
yes.
shot it
They
at the
just
ground, and it was so cool because like it just became his whole persona after that.
Yeah,
he didn't shower for like who knows how long. His
and
hair was all red, his beard was all red. I loved how it just like became this whole other kind of confident, like general kind of warlord. It was a very
dude.
cool change of persona for him. I
Yeah,
loved it,
and then
man.
when we get the years later version of him, and he's like, "Oh, you all turned me into Dark Dementus
Yes, the
because you
Dark
yeah,
Dementus. He's older and just dumber, like
yeah,
like a bit more clumsier now.
dude."
Like but
That's
then
some, yeah. These movies, like Mad Max in general, they do have good villains. Like that's the thing is you have
characters.
humongous.
Yeah, dude,
Yes.
like all the characters. I said that when when I did my review of Fury Road for Scary World, that just visually, all the characters on the screen, whether they're supporting, main,
Yeah.
antagonists, whatever, they're so unique, so different. Like the look of everyone is just like so like thought out that you can tell that Miller has this huge like brain universe going on with this thing because every character, like even like we saw here, which was really cool, a little bit more lore for the ground dwellers of the Citadel, right? We see like
Yes.
there's like cannibals in the tunnels and stuff, which I thought was really cool. I really did enjoy, I did enjoy all that world building stuff, but it came to the detriment of the Furiosa story. And that's why
Yeah.
I personally had to deduct points for it because it's like, yo, you had us there for Furiosa, you promised me more Furiosa, and I got some, but not enough. So I think that was a pro and a con of this kind of world building kind of movie. Again, with another like 30-40 minutes, I think he would have accomplished a more
Yeah.
well-rounded movie, in my opinion. I
And
don't know what you should have just gone for it. It's already long enough.
yeah, and it's such a weird criticism to say, right? Like to say out loud is because a lot of times when you say, "Oh, a movie feels long," you're like, "Oh, it's because you probably could have cut out some time. We could have got out of things sooner." But here, it feels long, but also not long enough, right? It's like it's not long in the places we want it to be long. Like, for example, one of the biggest examples, hilariously enough, is towards we're in the back hour, we're in the last hour 45 minutes or whatever, and there's a huge conflict that starts, and then the narration was and then a war took place for 40 days, and then it's just and then that's it.
Dude, oh my god, I'm so glad you brought up the 40-day war.
Yeah.
I am so disappointed we didn't even get like a couple of more scenes with the war fighting, man. I thought it would have been such a cool sight for Miller to just kind of, blow his load on that stuff, dude, because it's like it was there for the taking.
Right.
I really, really did enjoy that concept. Again, we get ideas, right? We get morsels of really cool lore that have no payoff, Like I want to see more of it, man. You kind of half-assed it.
Yeah, because I get it, right? Because the idea is well, this isn't important to Furiosa's story. But then, if that's the case, why show us some of the other things we see?
But you see,
right?
though, that's the thing. Like, it all kind of ties in, right? Because Furiosa is part of this conflict. She is literally like part of this conflict. So you had every opportunity, every chance to write her into everything. You could have Forrest Gumped her into every situation. You know what I mean?
Right,
Pretty much because So Dementis captures her and she's like in this cage with that smart guy who keeps
the
telling
history
Dementis,
man.
the history guy who tells Dementis everything he needs to know, which is pretty great. Another really cool idea, and so Furiosa is technically in the middle of everything, and there was the chance to show us more. Like there was, especially when you got to the Citadel, like there was so much stuff going on that you could have gone from Furiosa stuff inside the Citadel to the 40-day war stuff outside, to Immortan and his people in the war room upstairs over there. Like there was something there. I'm curious on Tex. I'm really curious to find out if there's like some director's cut out there with like more information, because I like now I kind of need to see it. That's the thing with this movie, man. It's so long, but I need to see more of it, man.
Yeah, like especially if you're gonna make like a biblical kind of fable like movie, right? Because a lot of the narration like towards the end, like it's great that when the Furiosa stuff and Dementis stuff like finally resolve, when they finally have their final confrontation, I really like
what a
it.
great
Because like
scene. What a great sequence. I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really like poetic dialogue and stuff. It's the stuff that Mad Max does a lot of. George Miller does a lot of that poetic dialogue and like heightened stuff, but it always, weirdly enough, it kind of always works because these movies are like that already, right? It's like everything's so exaggerated. It's just like, people talk in this theatrical way, right? Like
it
just
works
kind of
too,
like
because of the kind of villains we get, right?
Yeah.
Because of their look and how like grandiose they are,
Yeah,
right?
everything's so big, right?
Yeah, like if you go back to freaking Road Warrior, what's his name? Guy with the hockey mask. Yes.
So
yes, Emperor. The Emperor. Like
you have Humongous, you've got Auntie Entity, which is the Tina Turner's character.
Yeah, so like you
so
see
it's
these
like,
villains that are just legit larger than life characters within this world. This is why they follow them, right? Because they have this savior kind of quality, this Magneto quality to them,
Yes.
And it's the same with Dementis. It's the same with Immortan Joe. These characters are super interesting, and it is what makes those movies interesting, because like if you're following Riggs-along from 1, 2, and 3, right? As I call them, because part 1, he was all Riggs. He didn't turn into Road Warrior to part 2. So if you followed Riggs-along, like he was, even in that movie, he was overshadowed by the kind of weirdness of just the outlaw stuff that was going on in part 1, right? And in part 2,
1000%. Yes.
Yeah, in part 2, he also gets like overshadowed by the whole what was it, like the impound, the water thing going on, and the world building that actually happened in that movie.
Yeah, because that's the whole point of the point of the franchise before this, right? It was like, it's the story
he's
of
the Outlander.
Yeah, it's the story of Mad Max. Like it's the fable of like a legendary dude who helped them one time and he just kind of disappeared because he doesn't matter. It's just he pops up in these stories, and it's like Furiosa here when we get that final confrontation with Dementis and Furiosa. I like how it goes even further with that fable stuff, because it's like, oh, well, some say she did this to him. Some say like she just killed him right on the spot.
Angels.
Yeah, some say she like tortured him to like like bring it all full circle, and then some say she used him like as the base of a tree to plant, and it's like,
that was such a cool visual too at the end. That was really rad, man.
It's so cool, and that's the other thing. This is why you and I are like, man, we wish that stuff was longer, right? Because it's like when you get that stuff, it hits so hard. Like in the beginning, I really like the beginning of this movie too, like where it's like the past Furiosa stuff. We see her mom, like that whole sequence of their mom. Like
we needed to see. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Tex, because these women are, I think it's mostly women, right? I didn't see men,
because it's like in Fury Road. I think that's what the illusion is too, because she meets them in Fury Road and they're like, oh well, our
the
whole
Bubulini
society
or something like that. It was the name. But like, it's such an interesting society, because Like these women are marksmen, they ride freaking horses and they know how to farm and do all this stuff. And like you really want to see that stuff, especially in Furiosa. Like, how did you become such a great sniper, right? Like it's one thing that I really wanted to see happen. Her kind of learning the whole marksman thing because she seemed to have had it as a kid, but I wish it would have explored her ingenuity more, her creativity as a like as an actual like character. Like, oh snap, like Furiosa is smart, she's clever, she gets into tons of shit and mad trouble, but she's clever, she knows how to get out of it. Like, I wish they got more of that out of there, as we said. But like I do have to call out a huge major like gripe as well. As we are talking about the very positive stuff and how we liked how the characters look and all this other stuff. Um, there are some visual issues in this movie that did not happen in Fury Road, unfortunately. I don't understand what happened, to be honest with you, because it's like what happened, George Miller? I don't get it. I don't get it, Tex.
Like what a difference a decade makes, right? And it's tough because Fury Road, it's not like Fury Road was all practical either. And it's not like Fury Road also didn't have like perfect visuals. Like it didn't have like perfect CG or whatever.
No,
but
it had some funky stuff in it, but everything was just executed well.
Yes, and that is 100% it, right? Like it's all executed to like basically near perfection to such a way where you're like, man, it all just works together.
Yeah.
But here, there are moments where like some clear like CG and some clear like green screen stuff where you're like, man, that doesn't look so good. And that's a shame, right? When it's unfortunately the nature, right, of like following a perfect movie, right?
Because where it's like I can understand the story and wanting to kind of explore more of this universe that you finally have people wondering about, right? I get it, right? But like, my guy, like visually, Fury Road was so good. Like, what happened? Like technically, you didn't have to improve anything. Whatever you did in that production, right? I know it was a little kind of funky, that production. It had its issues, but technically wise, right? Like technically and cinematography, and sound editing wise and all that stuff, you had that already down. Like you didn't have to change a thing. But then I think they must have reallocated money to other sources, maybe like for actors, like this talent isn't cheap, but like but I think they could have done a better job. But again, it feels like he was like, okay, whatever, you really don't need to care about that too much. That's why he kind of looks over it, like it's the whole thing you said about the continuity, right? Like it's the George Miller thing. Don't worry about that shit. You don't got to worry about it. We're gonna get the good stuff later, don't sweat it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like I think you're 100% right. Like going back to the whole sandbox thing, it's just like it's kind of that, right? Where it's just like, let's just be in this wasteland for a little bit and just enjoy our time there and don't really think about it too much, right? And that's a shame because Furiosa is trying to tell us to think about it a little harder, and that is the disconnect, right? Where it's like you want the fun of Fury Road, and we get that fun here. But then also there are times where it's like, no, you really should pay attention and really think about things. And that's where it kind of goes off a little bit off the rails, right? Where it's like, you want to give us this revenge story and you hit the big beats in it and those beats land, but it's just the in-between that's not always there fleshed out.
It's funny, like we usually don't say that we want more filler, but we want more filler. Like, hey,
I kind of wanted more filler.
The actual filler wasn't there, as you mentioned. Like it does hit those beats, so we get those nice events that you expect from a movie like this, right? But we don't like. Do we earn those events? We kind of don't, right? Because we skip a lot of that, like building up to that stuff. This is why, in the beginning of the segment, I said I wish we got a training montage for her, how she got stronger, how she got smarter, quicker, faster, the EST of Fury Road. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we really needed for it to kind of earn these big kind of momentous events that she goes through, it does feel a little bit empty because we just kind of skip to it, especially after the war rig stuff where we see her underneath the war rig finally get exposed as being a girl because everyone thought it was a war boy. All right. And then from there we get this huge time jump where she's already a freaking Imperator, right?
Yeah,
Furiosa.
and
So
that's
it's
the
like,
thing.
what
It's like,
happens? How did you get
and
the title, dude?
yeah, and it's all of that. It's also like, oh, she's in like these big meetings with Immortan Joe, and he's like, he doesn't recognize her, one of the wives,
That's
and
what I
like
said
there's
earlier. It's like, can't you just see it's what's your wife, bro?
yeah, and it's sort of like that kind of stuff that's like kind of ooky and kooky that like,
Mhm.
it's a shame, right? Because once again though, because it's the stuff we get is so well done that it's also like, man, I just wish he gave us more of that stuff, right? I
Like the
guess it
arm thing was awesome. I'm like,
oh dude,
that's how it happens.
yeah,
That
so
was so cool, man.
it pays that off like so well done, right? Because
Yes.
it's like Nard in like a monster truck wheel, and Dementis is
Yes,
like
or a
monster
hand
truck.
sticking out of the freaking like window, and then here comes Dementis with his huge monster truck, which is like the last thing I ever thought would happen to her hand,
Yeah,
right?
and
Like,
it's so, and they play, and the sequence is so dope because then it's like after that he captures them, and he tortures Jack to death. Like he just kind of drags him, let the dogs eat at it
yeah,
for
dude, it
for
got
like a
really
whole
dark it got really dark in that sequence, man. I
yeah,
really loved how
which was
dark
great.
Dementis got too. Yeah, it was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, and then with her, it's like a whole day, and Dementis just kind of like ends it when he gets bored, right?
Yeah.
Because
He's
it's
like, all
so
right,
funny because
enough. Enough.
yeah, he's like, all right, we're done with this, and then you see like the arm that she cut off and got away with, and it's like, yo, it's so
The
dope.
arm is just hanging there. And then you see, this is why I also wish we had more of her story, because that was the arm that she drew her star map on. And it never
Yes.
gets called back to. Like, that was her way home, you
Yeah.
know? Like, that's one big detail that I wish it would have been like, hey, let me just go back and grab this arm or something, right? Or just
Right.
or just let me just peel the skin off this thing real quick. Like something crazy post-apocalyptic like that. But I wish they would have thought about that detail because it was super important. Like for her to not even acknowledge, like, oh my god, like yes, your arm is missing and stuff. And we get this cool sequence like where she's making their arm, which again, I think we should have built up a little bit more to that. And the star map is gone. And I'm like, damn, I wish they really would have paid that off because she spent so much time caring for that and making that and making sure
Yeah.
it wasn't exposed, And then we just kind of dropped that device completely. It's like, oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Give me more
And then
Warwick.
when you think about it too, in Fury Road, that wasn't really an issue for her either. Like as in she kind of knew where the green place was still. Like
Yeah.
like you never got the sense that she was just kind of running in a loose direction, and they
Yeah, it
were
would have been cool
eventually
if we got like a little like leather patch or something, right? Which is actually like, her skin and shit. That would have been dope.
yeah, like and then it's funny too, like this movie ends by closing that loop with like, showing her like approach the wives for the first time and then be like, and then sneak into the war rig and then
Yeah,
escape from there. And then it starts Fury Road. But it's also like,
that's cool.
did
I could have done
did
without
we
that, to
need
be
it?
honest with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
I personally could have done without that 100%. I was good after like her whole sequence with Dementis, right? Like you could have just put a title card there and some voiceover stuff. I was done. I
Yeah,
didn't need to
especially
see.
with the credits too. They like played Fury Road clips, which is super weird. Like it was like,
I
oh,
didn't like
this is
that either. Like,
yeah,
why are you
because
calling back to the better movie? Don't
yeah,
remind me how good it
especially
was.
yeah, especially because once again, like we've been saying this whole time, this is the first time he's cared about like continuity and canon and lore, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know if
You
this
see, like,
is
he's trying to do the Marvel shit by throwing the movie into the
yeah,
title cards.
yeah, and it's
Oh
like
man. But listen, like on a sour note though, the movie has not tracked well in the box office at all.
I saw
For
that,
the
yeah,
amount of money it spent, so who
which
knows
makes
if we're
sense.
getting that other movie he's thinking about, which is the Mad Max perspective of that whole story. Like while Furiosa was doing her thing, he has this idea of Mad Max Wasteland, which is like his story while Furiosa was doing whatever. And I'm like, dude, like, can we just focus on Furiosa, please?
Yeah, I don't think we need that. There's a fun shot of Mad Max in this movie too,
which begs the question of continuity once again.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, okay, was he an adult age when he saw a young Furiosa?
Yeah,
you know,
because we get that same exact shot in Fury Road, but he has like long hair now and everything in Fury Road.
Yeah, and so yeah, and that's the thing where this is, like we said, beating the drum here of like, yeah, he doesn't care, but also, I don't know, I didn't mind it. Like, yeah, it's fan servicey, but also it's just another thing. Like,
it just brought up, honestly,
too, right?
It did. It brought up other questions. I'm like, oh, what's Mad Max doing there? Like, why are you not helping out? She's running away. Like, what are you doing? You're Mad Max. And then come on, Riggs.
That also confirmed for me that Jack wasn't Max, because then, of course,
I'm
Jack
like,
dies and all
that guy,
stuff.
young Stacy, as I called him, young Stacy Keach. He has a scar and everything. So
and that's what I mean. Like, I think like there's a lot of good stuff in this, and it's the kind of movie that definitely won't make its money, and Fury Road didn't.
It'll make it probably in like Blu-ray and like home video and stuff like that.
That's the unfortunate thing that it's, if this were a decade ago, we could say that, right? We could be like, oh yeah, it's gonna make it through rentals and stuff and people buying the DVD, but we're in the streaming age and it's going to be streaming on Max eventually. And I'm sure it'll be #1 on Max when it hits, but also, does that mean anything anymore? I don't know. But at the same time, George Miller isn't a director who has to worry about box office. Like, I feel like they'll just let him do whatever he's going to do. And that's kind of fine. It's like, because
I'll be there.
Yeah, like Furiosa, it's a solid movie. It's like a numerical score on it. It's about like an 8. It's a solid 8 out of 10, maybe 8.5. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe 8.5. Just right. And like, it's a solid movie, but its biggest flaw is that it's not Fury Road, and that's not a bad flaw to have.
It's not a bad flaw to have at all. But if you do want to watch a better movie,
go watch Fury Road. Yeah,
that's our recommendation for the for the week as well. Go to Max and go watch Fury Road. In all its 4K goodness, it looks freaking great.
Yeah, so if you want like a perfect movie, like legit, like Fury Road is legit. Like, I think it's the best Mad Max is ever going to be, and clearly after Furiosa, like,
always
that's it, right?
Always, now, forever, together, whatever, it forever will be the best, But that's a wrap, folks. Thank you for listening. This has been episode 194 of The Morgue, the official CorpseFeed podcast, and I am Arturo Padilla, the guy behind the face, and with me always is Mr. Nick Valdez. A big shout out goes to Delvirus for all the artwork you've seen in front of you throughout the years, and a big shout out goes to you guys for listening. We have 193 episodes streaming anywhere you get your podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. Please go on Apple Podcasts. Give us some stars, whatever they are. We don't care. Rate it. Write a nice little comment. Tell your friends, your parents, your pets, all those people to just rate it. Leave a comment for us. We would highly appreciate it. We know you guys are listening, and we thank you so much. Like I said, we have 193 for you guys. Go check that out. We are on all the social platforms. Go check that out. Go like, subscribe, and share. Most importantly, go hit us up on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button on CorpseFeed. We have spoiler-free horror movie reviews for you guys 3 days a week, and we have The Morgue dropping on video form as well, folks. Again, thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's a scary world out there, but we are here to walk you through it.